So, let me ask you something. Do you ever, have one of those moments where you walk into a room and just completely forget why you're there? You stand there staring at the walls or, I don't know, a random piece of furniture, and then boom, it's just gone. Vanished into thin air. The reason, the motivation, the mission, you've got nothing. And it's annoying, right? Like deeply existentially annoying. But here's the thing. What if that's not such a bad thing after all? What if forgetting is not just some glitch in our mental software, but actually a feature? And I'm not talking about Matrix and how we are living in some simulation and all that blah blah blah. Yeah, I know it sounds weird, but let's dive into this. Face first, Olympic gold medalist style. Now let's start with the obvious. Memory is a powerful tool. It's what helps us, not die, short funeral and all that jazz. Like, if our ancestors hadn't remembered which berries were poisonous, we'd probably not be here talking about this. And I'm glad, because I'd rather not get into a fight with a poisonous berry, or forget to remember that tigers aren't cute large cats, and that fire hurts really, really bad on the skin. But what if remembering everything wasn't all it's cracked up to be? Let's face it, our brains are like hoarders. There's this interesting concept in cognitive science called hyperthymesia. It's a condition where people can remember almost every detail of their lives, like every day, every moment. It sounds pretty cool, right? But it's also kind of terrifying. Imagine being able to recall every single embarrassing, traumatic, or just plain boring event in your life with crystal clarity. Like you're sitting at a dinner party trying to have a good time, and suddenly, bam, you're hit with the memory of every awkward silence you've ever been a part of, every moment you rather not remember, but also the good ones. They do exist. But more than likely, we would lean towards recalling the trauma. Not fun, but most of us don't have hyperthymesia. We forget things. And sometimes that's a mercy. Like when you forget the name of someone you had a really bad date with, or when you can't quite recall the details of that argument you had years ago that felt so important at the time. Those memories fade, and we, move on. It's like your brain's way of Marie Kondoing your mental space, keeping only what sparks joy and letting the rest go. Okay, let's shift gears for a second and talk about storytelling. Movies, books, that sort of thing. There's this recurring trope in media where characters are either cursed or blessed, depending on how you see it, with amnesia. Think about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. In case you haven't seen it, the movie's about this couple who, after breaking up, decide to erase each other from their memories. It's, a bit more complicated than that, but you get the idea. The film plays with the idea that maybe forgetting someone, like truly erasing them, could be a way to move on, to heal. But then it also asks, wait, what if those memories, even the painful ones, are what make us who we are? What if losing them means losing a part of ourselves? And it's not just Eternal Sunshine. The concept of selective forgetting pops up all over the place. In Memento, for instance, the main character suffers from short-term memory loss and uses Polaroids and tattoos to piece together his life. It's like the movie's saying, hey, memories are important, but maybe it's the act of forgetting and the struggle to remember that gives our lives meaning. Let's do a quick thought experiment. Leave your comments below. If you lost 10% of your most important memories, would you be a completely different person? Something to think about. Then there's the whole Blade Runner thing, where memories are implanted in replicants to make them more human. The idea here is, if you have memories, even if they're not real, they shape who you are. So is forgetting better? Or do we need those memories, even if they're painful or, artificially created to feel like ourselves? Let's get a bit philosophical now, because why not? Nietzsche, good old Friedrich Nietzsche, had this idea that forgetting is an essential part of living a happy life. He called it active forgetting. It's like you choose to forget certain things, not because you're weak or lazy, but because you understand that some memories just weigh you down. Nietzsche argued that being able to forget is what allows us to live in the present, to embrace life with all its chaos and unpredictability. And then there's this ancient Greek dude, Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher who was all about focusing on what you can control and letting go of the rest. Forgetting, in a way, is an act of letting go. It's accepting that not everything needs to be remembered. Not every slight or failure or, moment of embarrassment needs to be held on to. It's like clearing out your mental attic so you can actually live in your house instead of just, stumbling around in the clutter. But I must admit, my favorite character on Sesame Street growing up was the Grouch. Dirty, but efficient. His entire lifestyle was going green, kinda. Anyway, now contrast this with Proust. Marcel Proust wrote In Search of Lost Time, and the whole thing is basically one giant meditation on memory. Proust was obsessed with the idea of recovering lost memories, of digging through the past to find meaning in the present. For him, forgetting was almost a tragedy, because it meant losing the connection to who you were, to the moments that defined you. So, you've got these two competing ideas. Nietzsche, who's like, forget it, move on, and Proust, who's more, remember everything, no matter how painful. And honestly, they're both right. Sometimes we need to forget to survive, to keep going, but other times we need to remember, to revisit the past so we can understand ourselves better. It's a balancing act, really. But hey, let's not just leave it at philosophy. What does science have to say about all this? Neuroscience in particular has some pretty interesting things to say about how and why we forget. You see, our brains aren't just giant filing cabinets where every experience is stored neatly away. It's more like a big, messy web where memories are interconnected but also kind of fragile. The act of remembering actually changes the memory itself. Every time you recall something, your brain sort of rewrites it, adding new details, leaving some out. It's like a game of telephone where the message gets distorted the more it's passed around, like some news channels that will remain nameless. There's also something called synaptic pruning, which is basically your brain's way of getting rid of connections it doesn't use. Think of it like weeding a garden. If a memory or a skill isn't used often, the brain decides it's not worth keeping around and it, prunes it away. So in a sense, forgetting is a natural part of brain maintenance. It's not that your brain is betraying you. Betrayal! It's just making space for new memories, new experiences. But here's where it gets paradoxical. Sometimes the more you try to forget something, the more it sticks around. There's even a term for it, ironic process theory. It's like when someone tells you not to think about a pink elephant, and suddenly that's all you can think about. The same thing happens with memories. If you're constantly trying to forget a painful memory, you're actually reinforcing it, making it stronger. Like Chuck Norris doing almost anything level of strength. Drop your best Chuck Norris joke in the comments. Anyway, this is where things get a little dark. Trauma, for instance, is something that some people would give anything to forget. But the brain, in its weird, twisted way, sometimes holds on to those traumatic memories even tighter, almost like it's trying to protect you by keeping you hyper-aware of the danger. It's like the brain saying, hey, remember this? Let's never go through that again. But instead of protecting you, it can end up haunting you, replaying the trauma over and over. And yet, for some, the process of forgetting, or at least diminishing the memory's power, can be part of healing. There's a type of therapy called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, that helps people process traumatic memories by, sort of refiling them in the brain so they're less distressing. It's not about erasing the memory, but about changing the way it's stored, making it less, sharp, like throwing mud on a disturbing painting for the sake of keeping your sanity. Now, culturally, we've got this weird relationship with memory and forgetting. On one hand, we're obsessed with remembering. We take photos of everything, our meals, our pets, the sunset, because we're terrified of forgetting, of letting the moment slip away. Social media is like a giant collective memory where everything is stored forever, for better or worse. But on the other hand, we've also got this desire to forget, to move on from the past. Think about how history is taught, or sometimes how it's not taught. There's a tendency to gloss over the ugly parts, to forget the things that don't fit the narrative we want to believe about ourselves or our society. It's selective memory on a cultural scale, but as they say, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. So yeah, maybe not the best strategy. I mean, think about making all your worst mistakes 1,000 times or at least 100 times in your life. What a waste of existence. And what about personal relationships? You know, the whole forgive and forget thing. But is forgetting really a good idea? If someone hurt you, is it better to forget what they did or to remember it so you can protect yourself in the future? It's a tricky balance. Like, if Susie was a narcissistic liar and Frank was a toxic and manipulative bum, might be good to remember when you run into them at Starbucks and you try to get their number because you both love pumpkin spice frappuccinos. Not soulmates, bro. Just saying. Forgetting might make the relationship easier in the short term, but what about long-term trust? Maybe it's less about forgetting and more about reinterpreting, about finding a way to live with the memory without letting it control you, harm you, abuse, or rip your heart into pieces of shredded paper. Not sure if all lessons need to actually be learned through pain. So, is it sometimes better to not remember? Well, yes and no. Forgetting can be a gift, a way to let go of the past and live in the present, but it can also be a curse, especially when it means losing touch with who we are, with the experiences that shaped us. It's like that saying, the past is a foreign country, they do things differently there. We can visit, learn from it, but we don't have to live there. Forgetting, in the end, is an art. It's about knowing what to let go of and what to hold on to. It's about finding that balance between Nietzsche's active forgetting and Proust's obsessive remembering. And honestly, we're all just figuring it out as we go along. So next time you walk into a room and forget why you're there, maybe, just maybe, that's your brain's way of saying, hey, relax, not everything needs to be remembered. Some things are better left forgotten, and that's okay. Really, it is. If this narrative resonated with you, do support us. Hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe. Thank you for staying with us to the end. See you in the next video on Plaid Chronicles.